Hi guys, my name is Desi Kadra and welcome to my podcast, Bridging the Realm. Today we're doing a Halloween live stream special, and as the title goes, we'll be talking about all things to do with guides, angels and ghosts. So as some of you may know, for the last month I've been focusing a lot on anything to do with the non-spiritual realm, life after death, and connecting with our deceased loved ones, following a launch of my fundraiser for Beyond the Veil documentary that I'm working on. So if anyone is interested in checking this out, you can check this in the link in the post in the video. So today I'm super excited to be having my guest Edwin Courtenay. He is a spiritual teacher, an author, a clairvoyant, a visionary artist, and a channel who works with ascended masters, angels, and the old gods. He is a practicing pagan who identifies as a cunning man, or one of the cunning folk, an old country healer, seer, spellcasters, and those who work with all forms of natural magic. Edwin has 7 published books, and his latest one, Angels to Go, we'll be delving into a little bit deeper today. And I've known Edwin for quite some time now, and he is just an incredible teacher, absolutely fascinating conversations. Every time we've spoken about anything, you just don't want to end this conversation. So I'm really excited today to welcome you all to Edwin. So Edwin, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
You're welcome. Hello, everybody.
How are you? How's everything today? How is everything in the north?
It's rainy and grey and grim up north, as is the stereotypical image of what it's like up here, but that's exactly what it's like today. But autumn is well underway, and it's one of my favourite seasons, so I have nothing to complain about.
Yeah, exactly. And you've recently launched your book, Angels to Go. How can you tell me just a little bit about that? I know you're signing a lot of autographs now and signing the books, so how is that going?
It's going very well, yeah. We launched it officially just last weekend. We did a Mind, Body, Spirit festival in Mansfield up north, and we launched it there. Prior to that, we'd done a few pre-orders on the internet. So now I'm fulfilling those pre-orders and scribbling away and sending out signed copies with little messages from people's guardian angels in. But so far, the book's gone very well, and the feedback that we've started to get back from people has been very positive.
Wow, amazing. Well, I can't wait to give it a read. I know you've spoken a lot about angels before. I've been to some of your talks on that, and it's just really fascinating. And it's just really, really interesting stuff. And okay, so as the title of the this podcast goes, Halloween special. So let's start a little bit about that. I really want to know what Halloween is about from your perspective, and what's kind of, is there sort of a misunderstanding? Do we know this sort of idea of the ghost and who you need to scare someone? How correct is this according to your knowledge?
So from a pagan perspective, Halloween is called Samhain. That's spelt Samhain. So it looks like it's written Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain. And it's basically New Year's Eve for pagans. So the 1st of November is the beginning of the new year, the new energetic year. And Samhain, October the 31st, is New Year's Eve. From a pagan magical perspective then, when the energy shifts from one year to another, the veil that separates the dimensions, our physical world from the spiritual world, becomes thin.
It's 10 o'clock.
Excuse me, that's my computer speaking to me. It becomes thin as the new energy rushes forwards into the year, and the old energy falls away. And as the veil becomes thin, our contact with the spirit world is much closer. So from a traditional Wiccan pagan perspective, it is only on this one day of the year that you are encouraged to communicate with the spirits of the dead. For every other day of the year, you're encouraged to leave them alone so that they can continue on their journey, so that you don't distract them. And it's only on this one day of the year, when the veil is thin, that you perform magical rites that enable the two spheres to cross over, so that you can commune with the ancestors and commune with the dearly departed. From my personal perspective as a non-traditional pagan and a channel, I commune and communicate with spirit all the time. And I think if it's done in the right way, then you're absolutely not preventing them from moving on their way. But from a traditional pagan perspective, it is only on this one night that we are encouraged to connect with them. So the whole concept of ghosts really comes from this concept that it is on this day that the spirit world is closer to us than any other day of the year. And as much as that means that our dearly departed and our ancestors are close to us, it also means that there are other presences that maybe wouldn't necessarily be so beneficial, earthbound presences and also negative entities. And so the whole concept of the pumpkin lantern is like a kind of gargoyle that scares away the negative presences, acting as a guardian or a ward, a magical ward, so that only positive presences can enter into the house and commune with you. I think the whole thing, the whole monsters and zombies and rotting corpses things, partly comes from the fact that ghosts have been seen in the past as being these rotting, crumbling creatures. And my understanding of that is that it comes as a result of a misconception of clairvoyants who saw something which is called the astral body or the astral doppelganger. So when we die, the spirit leaves the physical form and it is projected out of the physical form via the astral vehicle, which is an energetic or etheric replica of the physical body. Now, the astral body hangs around the physical body and slowly decomposes, turning back to energy. And so sometimes clairvoyants can see astral corpses, and as the astral corpse rots away, it looks quite unpleasant until it kind of explodes into astral dust. And I think in the past, clairvoyants have seen those rotting astral corpses because they do tend to linger in graveyards close to the physical form and have mistaken them for ghosts. And I think that's where the whole concept of the rotting appearance of the ghost comes from. But true spirits, true ghosts, if you will, whether they be earthbound ghosts or ghosts that are visiting from the spirit world, look just like you or I did. In fact, spirits tend to regress to a point in their life where they were comfortable or happy or felt confident in their appearance. So when you see friends and family, they tend to look younger than they did when they died. So there are certain things within the whole Halloween mythos that draw their origins from pagan Samhain or pagan Halloween. It's also a time of festivities in circles when witches conjure their magical circles or pagans meet. There's usually feasting, there's usually acts of magic that are performed for the people present, for others, for the world. And the doorway is opened in the eastern quarter of the magic circle, and that's where the spirits of the dearly departed are welcomed through, and then they enter into the circle and commune with those gathered there.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. So would you say that it's obviously, as you said, that's a good way, it's a good time to contact our deceased loved ones. So in terms of the sort of the people who are going doing trick-or-treating and all that, how does that affect them in any way? Does that help or does it not help?
I don't think it has particularly an adverse or necessarily even a positive effect. I think spirits that are visiting their loved ones on earth enjoy any kind of festivity, particularly where people are in a joyous space or a good mood. So whether somebody is hosting trick-or-treaters at the door or whether somebody's having a Halloween party, whenever the energy is positive and the vibration is high, it makes it easier for spirits that are visiting to make contact in that positive energy environment. So, and you know, anybody visiting would just be happy to see their relatives on earth having a good time.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do in my home is that when we have a meal on Halloween night, we will make up a plate of food for the dead. And you leave that plate on the dinner table whilst you're eating your dinner. And then you would put that plate outside the door or in the garden overnight. And it's just a kind of offering to the dead. And it's a symbolic gesture of acknowledging them and giving them energy and love through the sharing of food. And then the next day you bury the food or put it on the bird table or whatever, so that nature can kind of reclaim it. And that has its origins in various other traditions that are similar to Halloween, like the Day of the Dead in Mexico, where offerings are made to relatives, usually actually in the graveyard.
Yeah, I know they do that in quite a lot of cultures. I think in China as well, or somewhere in the Asian parts, they do that. Yeah. Oh wow, that's really interesting. You can see how, you know, these kind of myths and stuff, there is a connection to something in the past that, you know, you can kind of follow through. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with how you began your journey into this, because I know a little bit about it, and I know you started when you were quite young, sort of exploring crystals and going to some classes. But when was the very first time you realized that you had a gift and you could communicate?
So I was 5 years old when I first saw spirit. My grandmother died when I was 5, and we were living in Yorkshire at the time, and my grandmother was living in London. So we went down for the funeral. I didn't know her terribly well. I had very vague memories of her. And then we came back home, and I went back to school, and she appeared by the Ladybird books in the classroom and smiled at me. And I went and told the teacher that I'd just seen my grandmother, and they kind of, you know, patted me on the head. And then I went home and told my mother that I'd seen my grandmother, and my mother said that that was my imagination. But she never said to my mum that it should go away or that it was a bad thing. So from that point on, whenever I had similar visions, I just used the word imagination. That's what I thought it was called. When you saw things that other people necessarily didn't seem to be able to see, I just thought that you called it your imagination. So I would see people in the playground who looked like wizards, and we'd wander around the playground talking to each other. I would see visions in the sky of who I assumed were God and his wife, because there was always a male and a female figure present together. I started to communicate with what I termed my imaginary friend, who appeared like a very traditional ghost. So, you know, kind of like a little round head and like a bed sheet, really, with eyes. And he would talk to me, and then he would introduce me to other presences. And looking back on it now, I realized that it was the way in which my young brain was clairvoyantly interpreting the presences that I was seeing. So that continued right up until I was 12. And then when I started big school and realized that other people weren't talking to their imaginary friends, I made a conscious decision to stop doing that. And my clairvoyance just closed down. And then a little bit later on, when I was about 15, 16, I started reading books in the school library about psychical ability, and started to suspect that what I had experienced as a child was actually psychical phenomena. So then I started to consciously sit to develop my psychical and clairvoyant abilities. Now, by that time, I had decided that I was an atheist. I didn't believe in spirits. I didn't believe that there was life after death. I thought that you died and that was it. And I was approaching psychical development from quite a psychological perspective and looking at it in regards to the unconscious mind. And so first of all, I started to develop my clairvoyance using a crystal ball, which my mother bought me for my 16th birthday. Aww. And I had some success with that, though it took a long time. I sat with the crystal ball for half an hour every night for a year, which I think was much more a testament to the fact that I was very unpopular as a child, and not particularly testament to my great discipline skills. After about a year, I had my first vision in the crystal ball, and then things started to unfold with that. And then when I was 18, I'd read an article. I used to get Prediction magazine, and I'd read an article about how some people believed that when they used Ouija boards, or when they were developing mediumistic ability, they weren't actually communicating with spirits. They were communicating with their own unconscious mind. So for my 18th birthday, I got a Ouija board from my parents again. And I had a friend who was a spiritualist. He was developing actually to be a medium at the time. And he was terrified that I'd got a Ouija board. So he insisted that whenever I used it, he was present. And he was a big believer in the spirit world. So we sat every Thursday night. There was me and my friend and my brother and my dad with the Ouija board. I'd started meditating at the time. I was still using the crystal ball. And after a very short period of time, about a month, I discovered that when I put my hand on the planchette, words would just pop into my head, like a stream, like a conversation. And the planchette didn't really need to move anymore. I just needed to put my finger on the planchette and the words just poured into me.
Wow. So
then I was meditating at the time. I was using a system from a book called, I think it was called something like Psychic Development by a woman called Abby Gale. It's a really old book. I've got it downstairs. It's a great book.
Yeah.
And I was using a meditation method where you counted yourself down and went to a sanctuary space of your own creation. And there I started to connect with these two presences who introduced themselves as my spirit guides. One of them was a Native American. It sounds incredibly cheesy, but he was a Native American. And the other one was a Vietnam vet who was a medic in an American during the Vietnam War. And it was that contact that convinced me that these weren't just aspects of my own unconscious mind, that actually these were continuing living presences. And that completely changed my worldview. Now, around about, a few years before that happened, I'd started to explore paganism and Wicca. Never ever joined any covens. I've visited covens, but I've always been a solitary practitioner. I don't particularly consider myself to be Wiccan now. For me, it has very narrow definitions which don't fit for me anymore.
Yeah.
But I'd started to explore Wicca, and I'd started to work with the conjuration of sacred space. And once again, in Prediction magazine, there was a ritual for conjuring the archangels. And once again, in that article, it said that some people saw archangels as being manifestations of the unconscious. So because I wasn't a Christian, I didn't believe in angels, I performed the ritual. And I was expecting to see something, being clairvoyant, having kind of acknowledged that I had a clairvoyant ability by that time.
Yeah.
But what I wasn't expecting to see were the 4 archangels appear around me completely naked. And I remember looking at them rather suspiciously, and then looking back through the instructions in the magazine and thinking, I must have done something wrong, or is this an indication that my unconscious mind is diseased? Or and then so I closed my eyes and concentrated again, because they were supposed to appear in these beautiful coloured robes. And I opened my eyes, and there they were, still naked. And then one of them spoke to me and said, we've chosen to appear this way to you to make it clear to you that we're not projections of your imagination. We are individual living entities that have our own presence. And so that's where my conversations with angels began from that very moment. Then I started to work on connecting with my guardian angel. Yeah. And the first channeling that I ever did for other people was all to do with angels. It was either channeling the 4 principal archangels that I'd connected with from that very first ritual, or my guardian angel, or channeling other people's guardian angels. And that I did for a long time before I started to go into the realms of ascended masters.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So did you did your perspective on sort of Christianity change at this point? Because, all of a sudden these angels exist. It's like, wow.
Yes. Yeah, it did. And also what happened was that after I'd been channeling angels for people for quite some time, I was started to do this now for clients, and a client came, and when I said, you know, how can I help you? Usually the clients, knowing what I offered, would say, oh, I'd like to talk to an archangel, or I'd like to talk to my guardian angel. But this client said, I'd like to talk to the Master Jesus. And I was a bit kind of taken aback, and I thought, well, not only do I not believe in Jesus, but I certainly don't channel Jesus. So I thought, well, I'll close my eyes, and the guardian angel will come forward. And I closed my eyes, and the words that came out of my mouth was, I am the ascended Master Jesus, you know, and then this message. So after the channeling had finished, the woman was happy and pleased, and off she wandered. And I was kind of shell-shocked, really, and thought, what was all that about? And that's where my conversation with the Ascended Masters began. And that really completely shifted my worldview again, opening up my mind to the concept that Jesus had existed, and that he was now this enlightened being, and he was wanting to work with mankind. And and I've done a lot of study into that area, and continue to work with the angels and the Ascended Masters in that regards. And I think that what a lot of people don't understand in regards to the whole Christian thing is that it's nowhere near how it is presented in the Orthodox Bibles. You know, we know historically and archaeologically that those Bibles have been altered over the years. Yeah. And the original teachings of the Master Jesus, and the Master Jesus himself, is a very different character to the one that we might recognize in the Orthodox Bible today. And then I started to struggle a bit with the traditional paganism that I was following, and working with angels and working with Ascended Masters. And
quite a clash between the two.
Massive clash. I mean, you know, first of all, a lot of pagans, not all pagans, but a lot of pagans, and certainly a lot of traditional Wiccans, are absolutely not into Ascended Masters, absolutely not into Jesus, certainly not into angels, and not into channeling in that way. So I was already crossing a number of lines. And so I, first of all, started to say I was a non-traditional pagan, an eclectic Wiccan. But after a while, it just became more and more uncomfortable, that phrase. So I had to search around to find something else. And eventually, quite recently, really, settled on the phrase Cunning Man or Cunning Folk, because it's just a better fit for the type of work that I do.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about that, because it's not something that I've seen anyone else use before. So what's the meaning behind it?
It's a lesser known phrase, really. So the Cunning Folk existed around the 1600s, 1600s. That term, the Cunning Folk, was used predominantly in Scotland, though it was used in other areas as well, in Wales, in Cornwall, though they had their own names for it too. So the Cunning Folk were basically the wise men and women of the village. They were people that you would go to if you wanted some fortune telling, a bit of guidance on your future. If you wanted some healing, whether that was herbal healing, what we would now call spiritual healing, or whether you'd want a blessing or some act of magic performed. And they were called Cunning Folk because not only were they practitioners of these kind of mystical arts, but they were clever. They knew that if they presented themselves openly as pagans, they would be walking into the hangman's noose. So whenever they performed their blessing, their magic, their healing, they always read prayers from the Bible. They always quoted passages from the Bible. They always called upon angels and saints, so that whenever the finger was pointed at them, they could hand on heart say, well, all I do is read out of the Bible. All I do is read prayers. And anybody who was ever interviewed, who'd been to see them, would also say the same. So none of the Cunning Folk were ever hung for witchcraft in England. They continued a roaring trade. I think it was until maybe the 1700s when their practice was outlawed. And it was basically outlawed because the church was uncomfortable with people going to them rather than going to the local priest. And then their practice kind of went underground. Not a great deal was ever written about them or by them. They would have been literate, they would have been able to read, they would have been able to write, most of them at least. But any of their recorded information is largely lost. And any of it that does surface, you have to treat it with a little bit of suspicion as to whether it's genuine or whether it's been recreated. They were said to have little books of magic, and the books were said to have contained chapters from the missing books of Moses from the Bible. But their books would have also been a collection of folk charms that would have been handed down to them by parents and other practitioners of the cunning arts, really. So because the cunning folk worked with saints, which we would now call ascended masters, and angels, as well as working covertly with pagan practices, it's just a perfect fit for the type of work that I do now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it definitely describes this kind of rebellious side that you have to, of, you know, this is me, this is what I'm doing. I don't care about what you try to call it, or, you know, which I really like. I think everyone should find their own kind of way through this and not follow the standard way of doing it. And I'm a spiritual master, I'm a this, I'm a that. So
absolutely. One of my huge bugbears is when spiritual teachers or authors say, this is the way or this is the only way to do something, because my experience has been that there are hundreds of different ways of reaching the same point, and you have to find the way that works for you. And I've always been very keen on encouraging people to develop an eclectic belief system where they gather together the bits and pieces that they've encountered that work for them and that produce results for them, rather than feeling that they have to hem themselves into a specific pathway that rules out other options. And, you know, I know that sometimes some things don't always fit or marry together well, so you have to be a bit careful about that. But a long time ago, the masters said to me that the religion of the heart, they call it, is the religion which is an eclectic one, born from those elements of light practice that we encounter, that we resonate with and we recognize are right for us.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's really interesting. And well said as well. So tell me a little bit about, just to go back to the Ascended Masters, in your book, Ascension to Go, you talk about how they have a specific sort of tasks, shall we say, of working with people, with humans. Can you just talk a little bit about that and what they're doing, basically?
Yeah. So the Ascended Masters have always been around, but I suppose they were officially kind of presented to the world by the Theosophists and by Helena Blavatsky. She was in a state of telepathic communication with the Ascended Masters, but they also would, because she was the most incredible physical medium, and they would apport, which is a kind of spiritualist term for teleport, letters to her that she would read, and then she would write letters back to them, and those letters would disappear as they were sent back to the masters. And then Alice Bailey kind of took up the torch. I mean, the Theosophists continued after Helena Blavatsky with Annie Besant and Charles Ledbetter, but Alice Bailey also kind of took up the reins, and her books became very, very popular. She was an amazing character, Alice Bailey. She was a working woman who she would have to take in ironing in order to support her family, and so she would be doing other people's ironing with one hand whilst taking spiritual dictation from the masters with the other, and that's how she wrote many of her incredible books.
Wow.
And then the Ascended Masters kind of were lost a little bit for a while, and the focus went in other directions. I mean, the masters and the realm that they opened up in regards to things like fairies and divas and elementals were also championed by people like Arthur Conan Doyle, who of course was one of the presidents of the College of Psychic Studies in London, which is one of the places that I work from. And so the masters were presented as these enlightened beings. They had been human, and through the cycle of many incarnations on earth, they'd cleared their karma, they'd become self-masters. Divine realized is one of the terms that's often used for them. And now they were working as a kind of band or collective in order to assist mankind with their spiritual evolution and with the spiritual evolution of the planet. Elizabeth Clare Prophet in America and the Lighthouse Trust, they kind of brought the masters back to the attention of the world. And then that was also taken up by people like Eric Klein, who was one of the first American channels to start really pushing the masters forwards and pulling them into a spiritual perception, which is grouped under the term ascension. And then other people took up on that, Doreen Virtue, Diana Cooper here in England, and other teachers since then.
Yeah.
So they're a collective consciousness. They feature amongst their ranks very famous beings like the Master Jesus, the Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, St. Francis of Assisi, sometimes under different names. St. Francis is called Katumi, Mary Magdalene is known as Lady Nada, as well as lesser well-known master presences like Saint Germain, who is said to be Francis Bacon, who wrote the Shakespeare plays, Serapis Bey, who is an Egyptian pharaoh, Hilarion, who is an Atlantean priest, and even more contemporary masters like Watana, who is a Native American ascended master, Imra, who is a Muslim lady ascended master. There are literally supposed to be thousands of them out there. We've only really heard of a very small percentage.
Yeah, we only really know of like about 5 or 6, don't we? And then the rest are kind of just forgotten.
Yes.
Yeah. So do they all kind of just represent these different type of energies that we can work with for specific things? Is that?
Yes. So the energies that they represent are referred to often as the rays. And when the ray system was first presented, and I think that system, it was either presented by the Theosophists or possibly by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, there were just 7 rays that were spoken of. But now that ray system has expanded into the hundreds.
Where does the rays with the rays? Oh yeah, sorry, you were.
And the rays are meant to be the manifestation of the divine light or the divine emanation as it enters into our physical reality and becomes refracted through the limiting prism of our 3rd dimension. So if you just imagine the white light, and when it hits the prism, it becomes divided into the colors of the spectrum. This is exactly the same principle, that this white light is the energy of the divine, and the prism is our limiting 3rd dimensional reality, limiting time and space. And each of the rays then are the constituent ingredients of the divine light. And each of them has a master which patronizes the rays and helps people to work with it. So a few examples would be the 2nd ray is the ray of, now I'm using my understanding of the ray system here, which differs from other people's. So the 2nd ray is the ray of grace. It's watched over by Serapis Bey. The 7th ray is the violet ray. It's watched over by the Ascended Master Saint Germain. The 6th ray is the ray of the Mother Mary. It's the ray of nurture. The 9th ray is the ray of completion. It's connected to a lady Ascended Master called Lady Portia, who was Morgan Le Fay in one of her past lives, and so on and so forth. And we can call upon both the wisdom and the power of these rays for ourselves, for others, and for the world.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's so interesting. And I've seen, I know a lot of people who do sort of energy clearing and just sort of space clearing. They tend to call on them and work with these energies quite a lot. So I think,
yeah, the violet flame is probably the most famous of all the rays.
Yeah,
that is called upon, and it's called upon a lot for space clearing and the clearing of negative energy.
Yeah. Wow, there's so much to that. But I just so what about the specific guides that we have sort of that are working with us? How are they different, and what's their main job?
So everybody has a guardian angel, but not everybody necessarily has a guide. A spirit guide is aligned or awarded to somebody who is actively seeking to develop their psychical and spiritual development, and particularly their mediumistic development. The guardian angel is given almost as a kind of gift by God, by the divine, when our higher self, our soul, is first created, and it accompanies us through every lifetime and between every lifetime, trying to steer us towards clearing our karma, developing our potential, contributing to the divine plan, and just generally spiritually developing, being our best version of ourselves. Whereas the spirit guide works in a very specific way. They are more concerned with developing our psychical ability, connecting us to the spirit world, operating for mediums as a kind of psychic operator, connecting the frequency of the medium to the frequency of the communicating presence, protecting the medium, keeping their energy clear, and ensuring that they don't become vulnerable or harmed by negative energies or negative entities. Spirit guides are people that we have known in past lives. They have completed their cycle of incarnation, the guides, but not necessarily completed their karma or cleared their karma. And they return to people because there is karma that they owe that person. So whilst they are guiding us here on earth, they are also clearing their karma, so that they can progress and move forwards in spirit. So they are perfected spirits, but not perfect spirits. And guides can be anything. I mean, people sometimes fall under the misconception that guides are priests or medicine men or shamans, but they can literally be anything. There was a wonderful medium who I used to read about, whose guide was a banker. There was my guide used to be a pirate. He was what called Captain Jack Stowe, but he was very unpleasant person on earth, not particularly the nicest of beings, as it were. So they can literally
have to like your guides.
No, and you know, now that they're perfected, of course, they've cleared through a lot of their rough edges, as it were. But they can literally be any being, and they will present themselves to you in the lifetime that they knew you, and that might not be the last lifetime they had on earth. So they might have gone on to have much more spiritual lives than the one that they necessarily present to you, but they're presenting themselves to you in the lifetime that on an energy level they know you will resonate with and recognize them from. And our guides are really good at, because they used to be human, they understand our pains and needs and the day-to-day struggles of life, whereas our guardian angel, having never been human, doesn't always get that kind of thing. It doesn't know what it's like to be hungry or to have a bad back or to be tired. So whenever you've got a physical gripe, you're always going to get a lot more sympathy from your guide than you would your guardian angel. But your guardian angel is the being who knows everything about you. So if you want to know about your past lives or your soul purpose, the guardian angel is the person to go to.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow, that's so interesting. And it's really, so you used, actually, I just want to show, you did these portraits. I'm not sure if you still do them, but I've just printed out mine of my guide, a portrait of my guide that was just, I found really fascinating. And I remember you gave me so much information. So basically you do kind of like, it's channeled messages, right, from your guide. So you connect with someone's guide and you give them a message that they want to tell the person.
Yes. So the portraits that I do, which are of people's spirit guides or their guardian angels, they're done in a light state of trance. Trance is one of the methods that I use in my line of work. It's digital art. So I will take myself into a meditation space, get myself on the computer, and then usually about an hour later on, I'll kind of come around a little bit and see what's been created on the screen. And then I will tune into the guide or guardian angel, and they will give me their name usually, and also some information that they want to convey to the person, usually about their path or their psychical and spiritual ability, or something they need to focus on, or something they need to clear. And I love that kind of work. I love it because I think, because I've known my guide, because my guide, Jack, he was originally that little ghostly figure that I used to see when I was a child. And as I grew up, that turned into the presence that I know now. So I've had Jack since I was 5. I've known him for 43 years.
Oh, wow.
And he's been a constant companion to me, as has my guardian angel, Uraniel. And I sometimes struggle to think what it must be like for people who don't have that contact. So when I can make that contact for someone, and encourage them to like link into their guide, I think that can be a tremendous help for them in all areas of their life, to know that there's someone there who is always on their side, unconditional, non-judgmental, got their back, always wanting to steer them towards what's right for them. I think knowing that that presence is there can be life-changing, really.
Yeah, because it's almost like they have this very objective perspective on your life and everything that you're doing. So it's kind of like, you know, I mean, we're never really good at having that objective perspective because we can't, because we're in our own bodies. So no, I found that really interesting. I have to say, I was surprised at who he was, or, you know, she was, but in this case it was a he. But it really resonated with me because so one of the messages that you gave me, that he apparently gave me, was that I should pursue astrology a little bit more. And it's exactly at that point that I was getting into it very much, as I've always liked astrology and sort of reading up on horoscopes and stuff, but I never really took it up seriously until sort of the last 1.5 years. But that really resonated with me, and I thought, oh, okay, so maybe that was him pushing me to go into astrology, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought, okay, I see that. Yeah, I see that connection. Yeah, that was really interesting.
Our guides work a lot through our intuition and through synchronicity and serendipity and omens and portents. When we can't see them and when we can't hear them, they will use these other devices to point us in the right direction.
Yeah, and just kind of little signs or just little synchronicities that you get. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
It's quite nice. So, well, do you think what's the best way if we wanted to connect to our guides? What's the best way to do that? In meditation, or maybe just asking them for a sign?
I mean, I think meditation is key for pretty much any and all psychical and spiritual development. But I think, once again, the big misconception here is that when you say to somebody meditation, they immediately get this idea that they've got to sit in a cross-legged yoga position, chanting Om with incense sticks burning and surrounded by crystals. And although that's one way of doing it, you have to find the meditation technique that works for you. What you're aiming to do is to quieten the chatter in your mind and move into a kind of open space so that guidance and inspiration and messages can be projected into your consciousness. So some people do that with mantra and chant. Some people do that with yogic breathing techniques. But I know people who will take the dog for a walk, or mow the lawn, or clean the house, or do some ironing. Whatever enables them to move into that kind of disassociated state is right for them, works for them. And now there's some wonderful breakthroughs with modern technology in regards to meditation, because I'm very interested in modern technology and the way that science connects with the spiritual world. So there's been some great technological devices, and very reasonably priced ones too, that you can use to change the rate of your breathing, which we know also alters the rhythm of our electrical energy in our brain. And it's when we usually move into the alpha brain rhythm or lower that we have psychical or spiritual experiences. So there's devices that you can use to shift your breathing rhythm. There's devices that you can use that feeds back the electrical rhythm in your head, so that you can use that as a sound to try and bring it into the right state of consciousness. There's all sorts of YouTube videos of music, binaural sounds that affect the brain. So I would encourage people to dip their toe into lots of different meditation techniques until they find the right one for them. I'd also say, even when you don't know who your guide is, talk to them like you would a normal person, either in your head or out loud. I mean, not when you're in a busy public space, of course. And just, chat to them, ask them things, ask them for help, tell them about your day. That really, really helps to forge a powerful link between you and your guide. And it doesn't have to be in a ceremonial environment. You don't have to use any different kind of language than the language that you would normally use. You can just chat away to them. And if you can pause between your conversation, just in case there's anything that they might want to say in response to that in your head or around you through omens and portents and synchronicities, then fantastic. But yeah, I think meditation and keeping a line of communication open with chat.
Yeah, definitely. That's, and I guess it's just practice, isn't it? You just have to practice it. With me, I think, I mean, I've tried it many times, and sometimes I really do feel like I'm getting insights, but then the logical part of me would just be like, no, you're imagining it, or you're just making it up. It's like, oh.
Yeah, I think absolutely practice makes perfect. That's really, really important. I have people who come to me and say, oh, I've tried meditation and it's not worked. And I'll say to them, well, you know, how long have you been trying it for? And they'll say, oh, well, I tried it for a couple of weeks. Well, that's not going to cut it. You really need to throw yourself into it for at least a month. You really need to meditate every day if you can, or at least every other day, at least 3 times a week. It doesn't have to be for hours at a time. I find, even now, after meditating for 20 odd years, that I can meditate for about 20 minutes, half an hour a push. After that, I'm either asleep or I've started to think about something else, about shopping on eBay. So I think keep it short, keep it sweet, but regular. And the other thing I think is make it clear at the beginning, particularly if you're wanting to make contact with your guides, what is acceptable to you and not. So if you don't want to see them, if you think that would be frightening, tell them that. If you don't want them waking you up at 3 a.m, tell them that as well. You know, if you don't want them breathing in your ear because that's going to freak you out, tell them that. Just, you're the one who's in charge. You need to kind of set up the rules. And when you do that, they will kind of play by your rules. They'll do what is comfortable for you. And I think doubt and skepticism are really healthy. I would absolutely encourage it for people. I went through a phase when I first started to speak to spirit where I was completely convinced that I was suffering from some kind of schizophrenia. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they completely believe anything and everything that they come across. And you should be discerning, you should be suspicious, you should be a little bit doubtful. It just helps you filter out the nonsense from the truth. And you can always test the spirit. So if you feel you've made contact but you're not sure, ask them to come back to you again in a way that you're not going to be able to dispute. When I was going through my doubting phase, I used to kind of leave things in the middle of a table and say to spirit, right, move that. I'm going to go out of the room and come back in and I want to see it moved. And they never really play by your rules in that regard. But one day I came home and a spoon that I'd been given, I think when I was 5 or 6, it was a Queen's Silver Jubilee teaspoon. I found it in the middle of the road and it had been twisted in half.
Oh, wow.
And I went back into the house, took the spoon with me, made sure it was definitely my spoon, asked people in the house, you know, have you moved my spoon? I found it in the middle of the road. Nobody could understand how it got there. And then the next time I meditated, spirit said, did you get the spoon? And that was my sign that they, you know, give me a clear physical indication that they were there. So testing the spirits is absolutely acceptable, and they are very happy to try and provide you with a way of proving their existence to you. And you shouldn't feel uncomfortable with doing that. They're very happy to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, wow. I think you got a bit more than you asked for, didn't you, there? Yeah.
Yes.
So I really want to ask you, when you see, when you're tuning into someone's energy and you're trying to communicate with their angels and their guides, what does it look like physically? Are they standing right behind them, beside them? How far? You know, what does it look like?
So I have what's called objective and subjective clairvoyance. Objective clairvoyance means that I see things with my eyes open, but equally, I see things with my eyes closed as well. The majority of clairvoyants that exist are subjective, so they will only see images in the inner eye. Some people think that seeing things with your eyes open is more powerful and more accurate than seeing things with your eyes closed. That's complete nonsense. Subjective clairvoyant is as powerful as objective clairvoyance is. The only difference is that your brain is taking the impression that you receive in your head and turning it into an external hallucination. That's what objective clairvoyance is. So sometimes when I look at someone, I will see someone with them, and they are literally just like a normal human person stood by them. I see them for maybe 5 seconds, and then the image is gone, and then I would have to close my eyes and tune back into the image in order to see it more clearly again. Usually they stood by the side of the person or behind the person, and apart from the fact that they are of all different eras, all different nationalities, all different cultures, they just look like ordinary human beings. So when if I'm on a boring train journey, or if I'm waiting for a train in the train station and I've got nothing to do, I will sometimes tune into the energy of the space.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see people milling around with their guides, trailing behind them, trying to steer them this way or that way, or connect them to this person or that person.
Yeah.
But I'm always also very heartened by the fact that there's such a tremendous sense of love that connects the guide to the person too. It's not, I think Hollywood has done us all a great disservice by making the whole communicating with spirits thing seem very spooky and frightening.
Yeah.
And there can be moments where it catches you off guard, and it can be a little bit scary if you don't know what you're experiencing. But in general, our guides love us, and our guardian angels love us. And so the predominating feeling is one of love. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's really comforting to hear. I have to say, in the beginning, when I first started learning about this, and just the idea that there was someone constantly with me, and they're there with me when I shower, they're there with me when I go to the shop. It was a little bit disturbing, I have to say.
Yeah, I remember saying to my guide, I said to him, well, I find it a little bit creepy that, I'm having a bath and you might be there. And my guide said to me, why would I want to sit in the bathroom with you whilst you're having a bath? Why would I want to do that? I don't want to do that. Whilst you're doing that, I'm off doing other more important things and sitting watching you, shaving your legs or washing your beard. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So we mustn't think of them like they're attached to us by a lead.
Yeah.
When we're not communicating with them or doing anything with them, they will be elsewhere doing things that they need to do in the spiritual world.
Doing their own stuff. Yeah. Okay. That makes me feel a bit better. Yeah. And I've always wanted to ask, so can the guides see the angels? Are they kind of on the same wave, frequency, or are they just
Yeah, they can communicate with each other, absolutely. And they can see each other. And they're usually in a state of liaising with each other constantly about guiding their ward in the right direction. And they will kind of tag team. So sometimes when I reach out with a question, my guide will kind of go, that's his department. And then he'll turn me towards my guardian angel. And sometimes the guardian angel will say, I don't know, ask your guide. That's not one of my kind of specialities. So they're always kind of in league and working with each other.
Yeah. Okay. And what about angels? Tell me a little bit about what you've written about in your latest book, because there's just so much to do with angels, and there's so many different variations and
do a shameless plug and just so these are the books. This is the new book. This is what the new book looks like here. Angels are and have been for a long time my absolute passion. I love them. I love working with them. And I realized when I was writing the book that when I work with them, how happy I feel when I'm surrounded by their energy, when I'm saturated in their energy. I feel kind of lighter and more joyous and more optimistic and generally more loving. So because they are described as being 95% love energy, the kind of washback effect that we get when we work with them is being surrounded by this positive force. But they're also incredibly wise beings. They have tremendous insights and understandings of the metaphysical universe and spiritual mechanics, and so we can tap into them not only for their power, the power that they represent, but also for this vast reservoir of knowledge and information as well.
Yeah. Oh wow, definitely. And I know you have to go in a bit, but I just wanted to ask: do you think the angels would have some sort of a message for us right now? Because I know the world is going through a bit of a turmoil, to say the least. So
yes. So one of the things that they've talked about often is a process which has been called quantum seeding. So quantum seeding is about informing the universe around us of what we want from life and what we expect from life. The angels say that we are intimately connected with our universe. We have a powerful effect upon our reality. And when we think negatively, when we think pessimistically, when we get caught up in doubt and fear, we can inadvertently and unconsciously contribute to the manifestation of this negativity in our life. And what we need to get back into the habit of is informing the universe of what we want. Now, they encourage that we use this symbol. This is the flower of life symbol. And it's become super popular, the flower of life. It was quite an obscure sacred geometry symbol, but you can find it more and more now. And not too long ago, it was used on the album cover of Coldplay. And when they performed at Glastonbury one year, the stage was literally plastered in the symbol. So it represents the tapestry of life, the connection, the bending light that connects all things together, us to each other, us to the trees and the animals and the plants, us to the world, us to our guides and the angels, and ultimately us to the divine. So if you can visualize this symbol, or if you've got a pendant with it on, or a picture screensaver on your computer, and you can focus on it, what you need to do is you gaze at the symbol, you acknowledge that you're part of the symbol, that you're tied into that tapestry. You allow your intention, your awareness to flow to that truth. And then you start to tell the universe what you want from your day. And once again, you can do that in very ordinary language. You can say it as a stream of conversation, or you can repeat it as a series of affirmations. So you might say, today, my train will be on time, my journey will be pleasant and flowing, my meeting will go well, my health will be radiant, my sleep will be sound, today I will meet the people that I am meant to meet, today my thoughts will be positive, today my aches and pains will fade away, today my heart will be full of love and joy. And you might just repeat those phrases over and over again, or you might just repeat it as a kind of streaming conversation whilst focusing on that intent radiating outwards through the web into the universe. And the flower of life just helps the universe hear our conversation, get what we want from it, and then the universe endeavors to oblige by bringing into manifestation the things that we want. So it's a great exercise for thinking more positively. It's a great way of strengthening our connection to the universe around us. And it's a great way of seeing how we can reorder our reality through conscious, positive thought.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's really powerful. Yeah, and it's almost like you're the one directing the energy and where to go, because obviously so wherever our mind goes, the energy goes. So hence.
Absolutely, energy follows thought is one of the phrases that's often used, and quantum physicists are beginning to seize on this, and they've started to recognize how the intention of the observer of experiments impacts upon the results of experiments. And this has started to enable them to recognize and see that our thoughts, our intentions, our expectations have an impact upon the quantum world, and the quantum world informs the grosser macrocosmic world.
Yeah, wow. Oh, it's interesting. I just wanted to point out that since I asked you about angels, the whole image just went a bit haywire. So I feel like
Oh.
this, the energy just rising and them trying to kind of say something. From your kind of recent communication with the Ascended Masters and angels, is there a specific message that you think maybe people watching this should hear right now? Or should
Yeah. So I think that they have always been very keen on us taking greater responsibility for ourselves. This is what they term as self-mastery. So although they would encourage us to be positive, they don't want us to fall into the trap of becoming apathetic and inactive. They don't want us to fall into the trap of just thinking, oh, everything's going to be all right, and the masters will sort it out and the angels will sort it out, because that's not how it's going to be. We are here on earth to sort it out with their help. So they want us to be proactive, and they would encourage us to do what we feel we need to do, whether that's writing to our MP, or whether that's joining a march or signing a petition, or whether it's more practical things like choosing not to eat red meat or being more conscious of our recycling or what have you. Yeah. But they also say that when we feel that there is nothing that we can do, then what we can do is pray. We can use our positive thoughts to shift and change the movement of the world. We should never try to change another person's free will. That would be considered to be black magic. But we can try and open people's hearts to be more compassionate and more loving and more tolerant of each other. So do what you can do on a physical level in accordance with your own moral compass to make the world a better place, from the tiniest things to the biggest things. But when you come up against something and you think there is nothing I can do, then what you can do is you can pray, you can use the power of your positive thoughts to make positive change.
Wow, that's such an important message. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Do you think we can just finish with like a tiny little prayer for anyone who's starting their day today? Just lift up
Absolutely. So wherever you are, whoever you are, just close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and bring your attention to your heart. Divine source of all light and love, Divine Father and Divine Mother, open our eyes that we might see, our hearts that we might know. Use us as vessels and conduits through which your wisdom and your power might flow. Grant us your protection, a cloak and shield to keep us safe as we journey on our way, and hold in the well of the palm of your hands all of those that we hold dear who might benefit from your healing light. We also ask for healing for the earth and for the people of the earth, wherever and whoever they might be. This we ask in accordance with the divine will and the will of our higher self, and for the greater good of all. Let this then be so, so mote it be. Amen.
Amen. Wow, thank you so much. That was
You're
amazing.
welcome.
It's weird how just the smallest of things like this can make such a huge difference to your day and just to your energy altogether. Before, I was never quite I would never tune in to the energy, so I wouldn't really know, and I just think, oh, it doesn't make a difference, so I didn't really believe in it. But now that I'm a little bit more tuned in, you can definitely feel the difference in the energy and just how you feel in general. You just feel so much lighter and just better. So
absolutely. And I think, when we first start out doing prayers and affirmations, it just sounds a bit kind of bonkers and a bit hippie-ish, and we think, no, thank you very much. But the proof of the pudding is always in the eating. So give it a go. And if it works for you, if it resonates for you, then carry on doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, amazing. Edwin, this has been such a huge pleasure to speak to you today.
Thank you very much.
I know you have a lot of workshops that you do in London and also in the North. For anyone who might want to
11 o'clock.
Can you tell me a bit more about that? About what's coming up? Yeah.
So I've got a few things coming up at the College of Psychic Studies in London. Some of them are already sold out, but I will be coming down in December to do the winter solstice celebration, which looks at Christmas from a spiritual perspective and looks at the pagan and Christian spiritual truths and myths associated with that time. Up north, I've got a few workshops here in Northumberland that are still running. You can find details about those on my website. And I've got one more workshop, I think, running in Surrey, which is just at the very beginning of November, which is to do with the energies of the new year and the patron ascended master of the new year. And once again, if people go onto my website or get in touch with me, I can point them in the direction of the person who's organising that.
Yeah, which is edwincourtenay.co.uk.
And I've also got a blog as well, which is edwincourtenay.blog.co.uk, where I post spiritual insights 6 times a week.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, that's a wealth of knowledge there. And I know you like to talk a lot about these things. So yeah. Right. Well, thank you so much again. It's been an absolute pleasure. And have a great day. And hopefully we'll catch up again in a few months and see what are the changes that's been happening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And bye-bye, everybody.